Welcome to our latest Zillow speaker series. I'm incredibly excited today. We've had some extraordinary speakers come speak with our company, but this is our first ever head of state. So this is very exciting for me. So I'm very pleased to welcome President Vicente Fox and his wife Marta. President Fox is the second of 9 children, and he grew up on an 1,100-acre ranch in Mexico. He earned his business degree from Ibero-American University in Mexico City and started his career as a truck driver for Coca-Cola Mexico. He rose to become CEO of Coca-Cola's Mexico operations. He was elected governor of his home state in 1995, and in 2000 was elected president on a platform of ending corruption and improving the Mexican economy. Since leaving politics in 2006, President Fox has focused on building the Vicente Center, which is the first ever presidential library built outside of the United States. So please give a warm Zillow welcome to President Vicente Fox.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you for this invitation to be here with you. And thanks to your Corporation of Excellence, this wonderful place where all of you form part of the team. But speaking about teams, let's first toast to the Hawks. It's incredible how one event can mobilize enthusiasm, optimism, not only in a community or a state, but even a region. And I also want to toast to the Lions from Leon, which is my hometown and Martha's hometown, where we live today, and they also won the soccer championship, national championship, just about a month ago. Same story of success in the sense that both worked as a team, that both did not have big stars, but they had that unique characteristic of the capacity to work and succeed as a team. And that's what happened with this company. It's incredible when 3 leaders take a decision to move out from the place where they were, create a new idea, transform it into a company, invite a team of professionals to join in, and look at what has happened in such a small period of time. And this is what is leadership all about. Having purpose, having objectives, like maybe many of you are thinking to replace these 3 young people that lead the company today. Maybe some think, no, it's going to take too long for them to retire or move out. And when am I going to get there? But you should have that kind of thinking. You should always, as leaders, think about heroic aspirations, heroic purposes and objectives, because that makes us grow. And that makes us grow further, higher than we ever thought that we could do. That's a key component of leadership, to have those heroic aspirations. You'll find out how much you can grow every day. But purpose is not just one for a lifetime. We must develop, strengthen, modify purposes frequently. And we must maybe make a review every day. As Deepak Chopra recommends, gift yourselves with 5 minutes in silence every day. Think about your work. Think about your family. Think about your community. Think about the hawks. Think about what's coming tomorrow. What will be next? And then you will come to conclusions. And maybe you will adapt or modify your objectives. And that's a great exercise, because the way the world moves today, so fast, in such unknown directions, we discover new things every day. Like you and the founders here discovered that market niche. That means over 300 million US dollars. And like that, there might be many other niches to find and many other actions and moves to take. Today, we're privileged. Each and every one of you is highly privileged, but also anybody else in the world. Not only who is sitting on a computer, who is working with creativity and innovation, who is serving others on a market need that was discovered, but we all have access to that cloud of knowledge. That cloud of knowledge that accumulates all the learning, all the experiences of centuries, of millennia, and fortunately it's even organized in order up there in that cloud. Maybe this is what they discussed back in the first Renaissance in Greece, when Academus invited to his home the Platos, the Ciceros, and all the philosophers at that time, just to sit down, have a good, nice cup of wine, and discuss about things, and think about the future. They didn't have access to that cloud, and yet they came out with that renaissance of ideas that is spread out to the world. And even today, they are relevant, and they are important messages that we should review once in a while. Then the other Renaissance, Florence, the Medici family. Also, they sponsored this gathering, and they convoked all the poets, painters, the architects, the musicians, and everything related with art and music. And they made a revolution. They provoked a renaissance. And that's what we're seeing today. This is a renaissance of ideas. Maybe those who provoked that mammoth world crisis on mortgages just a few years ago, that destroyed most of the mechanism and logistics of the financial markets worldwide. And that unfortunately the impact was poverty spreading all around the world. And maybe most every family lost half of their patrimony at that time. And yet those who were building that financial structure, that niche that used to serve for the best of the purposes, which was provide money to the markets, to the families, to the corporations, to the communities, and they say they overdid it and the crash came. Maybe this corporation will next time give us an early warning if that would happen again. The lesson for the financial minds and the financial markets also was pretty well understood. But still, I think that nothing should have been changed in advance. Because that flow of money that was created upon mortgages and in the financial markets came to build up the most successful 10-year cycle of economic growth in the world. We had never before seen something like that. And in that period of 10 years, I can use the example of Latin America, poverty was decreased by 18% for the first time in the history of Latin America. Because money came to governments, came to local governments, came to companies and corporations, came to entrepreneurs and brilliant minds to use that money to do things for others, to create wealth, and that happened. The world expansion, economic expansion was like never had happened before. And the Chinas came about, and the tigers of Asia came about, and the Indian model of intensity in building human capital came about. So many good things happened. But like everything in excess sometimes becomes a problem. When you eat too much, when you drink too much, when you smoke too much, when you use marijuana in excess, you get into problems. All of that is common denominators. Fortunately, you're in a part of the world which is a leader of creation, of ideas, of innovation, the West Coast of the United States. You're setting trends here to the rest of the world. Time ago, it used to be France, it used to be others, but now it's you. And that's a big responsibility upon your shoulders. Each one of you to be creative, to innovate, never stop at any moment. It's always new things to do. And we have the fortune to be and have total access to that cloud of knowledge. You are the envy of the Platos and the Ciceros and the Michelangelos. You can do much more than what they did. We can do that. And that's why it's forecasted on this illimited growth book that during the 21st century, we will move from 80 years expectancy of life to 130. That certainly will be boring. 130 years. But that's what is coming within this century. We will all together eradicate poverty. Imagine if we do that, how proud we're going to feel, how happy we're going to be. Because it's sad to see poverty around. It's sad to see people or kids without opportunities to go to school or have access to health. But with your work on every day and your ideas, we're going to solve that problem, also poverty. And many other. Health. It's very possible that cancer will be totally controlled and eradicated within this century. And we're going to see a lot of good things happening, but it's if we build them. If we just sit and observe the cloud up there, things will not happen. And that's the main characteristics of leadership. Make things happen. That's the cherry on the pie. Too many discussions, meditations, planning, but that's not enough. Look at how democracies, even if they are 200-year-olds, like the one here in the United States, it's incredible, but it's not delivering. And it's not delivering because there's two institutions that discard the capacities of the other. Republicans claim that Democrats are totally wrong. Democrats claim that Republicans are totally wrong. And who is paying the price of that? Decisions are not coming soon enough. And what I say about this democracy, I can say about ours in Latin America. Democracy doesn't seem to be delivering. And maybe they need a big doses of the thinking and the philosophy and the ideology of this group here. That you work all together for one purpose. And that's team working. And that's what brings success. And that's what can serve the main purpose of bringing happiness to every home, to every child, to every family, to every community in the world. So don't think about you sitting on a desk and doing a routinary work. You're like that construction worker which was building the cathedral. He was putting brick after brick, board. He said, this is boring. I'm not being paid enough. I don't like it. And then somebody came and told him, you know what you're putting bricks for? He said, no. Well, you're building a cathedral. Ah, that's interesting. And you're building a cathedral to praise God inside of that cathedral. And that's the message to us. We're building a better world in this 21st century. Everybody's in one trench, and everybody's passion, compassion, commitment is what counts. So God bless all of you, and now let's get into some questions. Thank you.
So we got a lot of great questions submitted ahead of time. Thank you for that. The first question I'll start with, Mr. President, is what are you most proud of from your time as President of Mexico?
But when I married Marta. July the 2nd. Was born July the 2nd. We won the president July the 2nd, and we expressed our love, and we got married on July the 2nd. So that's a very special date for us. No, but what am I most proud of? It's, I would say that it was keeping close to people, keeping close to the people Martha and I were serving. Not ever forgetting about what we had to do for them, for our customers, for our clients. And that's something that in politics is not really done with conviction. Usually politicians work to be successful themselves, to make their party successful, to win the next election, and to keep their career growing and growing. Very little, really, at the end, they think about people and what people want. Look at ideologies today. Ideologies are prevalent. Asia now has changed that. They have become very pragmatic. So they don't talk about mouse ideology or mouse thinking. They speak about how to export more, how to create more jobs, how to grow middle classes in China, how to have infrastructure and homes for everybody. Very pragmatic governments. And I think that's a key issue. A government should worry much more about that than ideologies.
So we've had other speakers, including Senator Maria Cantwell from Washington and Mark Warner from Virginia, who were accomplished business people, as you were, and then entered the field of politics. So can you compare and contrast your time in the business world with your time in politics, and just talk about the differences between politics and business?
Well, I remember my thinking. I was really scared about being in politics and what to do there and what was all about, because all my life was in private sector. It was very difficult for me to gear my mind and adapt to what was coming. But I said to myself, it has to be exactly the same. I have to sell things to customers and to citizens, as well as I do by selling Coca-Cola. I have to get customer satisfaction. I have to optimize resources. I have to do planning. I have to implement quality control programs. At the very end, it's the same thing. But it's not easy to carry all that package of things and bring it to public life. There, everybody thinks different. Everybody works on a different stage, and it's really complicated. I think governments need much more being nourished with all these tools, all these instruments that are used on the private world. I think it's highly and badly needed.
Can you talk about the state of U.S. Mexican relations right now?
Yeah. Well, on the surface, it's always said that it's great. That's what we hear from decades and decades. And every president says now they are at their optimum. But that's not really true. I think that we built through NAFTA the most visionary idea of partnering together to build up better capacity to develop for our nations and to satisfy better the needs of our citizens in the three nations. And the idea worked, and it's been extremely successful. But it's getting old now. It's a 20-year-old idea that has to be renewed, that has to be reinvented, and that has to take us to a much stronger partnership. Because maybe many of you don't even think about Mexico as a partner. I mean, who is that little guy down the border? What's going on in Mexico? Are they going crazy? Are they drinking too much tequila? Why the violence? And what's going on there? Well, we're a solid partner of this nation. And the competitiveness of this nation has a lot to do with the partnership in NAFTA and has a lot to do with the migrants, to regain that competitiveness that is needed today when the East is moving pretty fast. We have to protect our jobs. We have to protect our income. And we can do that by really partnering. Maybe you don't know, but Mexico buys from this nation, imports to Mexico products, ideas worth well over 350 billion US dollars that account for millions of jobs in this nation for US citizens. And of course, US corporations export, or your company export ideas or products to Mexico worth also 350 billion. So we are by far the largest trading balance in the world. Today, Mexico and United States, very similar to what China is doing with United States. So we're a solid partner, a reliable partner, but sometimes that doesn't seem to be understood. So one thing that is mandatory to happen would be to come up finally with that migration reform, which will be bringing some enlightenment to the issue of migration, because right now, most decision makers in this nation consider it negative, that is not good for the United States. There is a very bad confusion between terrorism and migration. It's two different things. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. And this nation's economy can keep being the leader and can keep being competitive only by understanding this exchange. So that's why we should advance quickly to that migration reform. I'm not for open borders. I'm not for disorder. I'm for the use of wisdom, the use of our intelligence, and decide how we can make the best use of migration, how we can make it a win-win situation. And certainly we can do much better than what we have today.
So, I mean, the two hot-button issues, of course, are immigration and what to do about illegal immigration in the U.S. and the drug violence situation. Those are the two things that sort of weigh on, I think when you ask most Americans to free associate with Mexico, those are two topics that are top of mind. So on immigration reform, do you think the U.S. should have a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants that have been living in the U.S. for a long period of time? Or should there be some sort of amnesty for people that are living in the United States illegally to become citizens? That seems to be the linchpin of that.
The answer is yes. I mean, prohibitions don't work. They have never worked. And there is a path ahead for that. If we go back to the founding fathers of this nation, they stated that governments don't have the right to intervene in my conscience, to determine my behavior. That's the essence of freedom for each individual, claimed in the U.S. Constitution and claimed by the founding fathers. But more so, those of us who have a religion, same thing. We know we were created free as that we are permitted, or we can go against God himself, that we can sin against him. And we have that kind of freedom. That's the way we were created. The prohibition on drugs was created here in this nation 100 years ago. Before that, drugs were not prohibited. They would let the individual to decide what was good for him, what was bad for him. So this nation stated the prohibition because of dogmatic and religious reasons, not even health reasons, dogmatic and religious reasons. And that's why alcohol was suppressed and prohibited, and that's why that prohibition couldn't stand and was taken off back here in Chicago. But the prohibition on drugs has remained since. And I think that essentially, ethically and morally, it should be legalized. And my thinking is all drugs. Because whatever crusade we have done, this war on drugs convoked by President Nixon was an absolute failure. Instead of reducing, consumption has increased and increased and increased and increased. Same happened in Mexico with the war on drugs with Calderon, President Calderon. More human rights violations, more consumption, more homicides, more killings, more bloody killings. That's the only thing that happened those 6 years. 80,000 kids died in those 6 years. And they were not born criminals. They did not have criminality on their genes, and yet they died. So, who is leading this war on drugs and against cartels? This nation, not Mexico. We're being used. We're being used. And we're getting a chip. Here's 500 grand, 500 million. Stop the drug in your territory. Stop the cartels in Mexico. Maybe you know, or you don't, that we don't consume drugs in Mexico. We don't produce drugs significantly. Drugs come from the south and are transferred to the north through Mexico. And the money is raised here, $50 billion US worth every year, that go into the hands of the cartels. Only wise leading minds like Washingtonians, like people from Seattle, have sat down and think about it. And so now the change is here. Why should we let those 50 billion be in hands of criminals when they can be in hands of government and they can be in hands of entrepreneurs? And that's the difference. That's the paradigm. But Mexico has to get out of this trap. And we don't find out how. Because those 50 million come to Mexico in the form of weapons, ammunitions that come from the United States. They come to bribe public officials. They bribe with 50,000 grand, with 100,000 grand, and it's difficult that people would not take them. They come to pay salaries for those well over 100,000 kids that work for the cartels. And they pay them $500 a month. Unfortunately, the business community cannot pay $500 a month for a decent job. So we have a problem, and we think can be solved here. If more and more states, and I hope very near by California will take the same step, and that will be the peak point and the balance to come. Uruguay already legalized, Holland legalized, Portugal legalized, and guess what? Portugal, a reduction on consumption of 25% in 10 years. Reduction, and it's legal now. The thing is that illegally you find the drug. Legally you find the drug. But maybe Justin Bieber, if he would have been, and I'm writing an article on this, it's serious. If he would have been on a non-prohibitionist environment, maybe he would not have done what he did. Maybe we, instead of feeling a star that needed to be shown to the world and that he needed to show that he's a rebel and that he doesn't accept prohibitions, maybe he would not have thought like that. Maybe he would say, if I can consume my drugs, I don't have to call the attention of anybody else. I think he would have behaved different, Justin Bieber. So that's my thinking. I pray that the change comes because Mexico has to get out of this trap. Not only 80,000 kids die, teenagers, but we have lost tourism. We have lost foreign investment coming to Mexico. We have lost tranquility. And you know better than I that we human beings perform at our very best on environments of harmony, peace, tranquility. Just look at this. This is when you can be productive. I visited places there with the people that is now on the business of drugs, the legal business of drugs. They don't harm anybody. They're a business community. Nobody has ever died of overdoses of marijuana. To kill yourself with marijuana, you need a truckload of the green stuff. Eat until you boom. There's no other way you can die from marijuana.
So, would you go so far? Were you suggesting that all drugs be legal?
Everything.
Cocaine, heroin?
Everything, because the base is, if somebody wants to suicide himself, what you can do about it?
Would you go so far as to say that the 80,000 drug-related deaths in Mexico are, that there's blood on America's hands for those deaths because the demand came
might be
from
too
here?
rude to put it that way, but what I can assure you, if they would have had a job, they would have taken the job. If they would have had the opportunity to come and migrate to the States, they would have taken that one. Or if they would have a scholarship to go to school, I'm sure they would be there, 99% of them, or instead of going out every day to kill or die for $500 a month.
Why don't I open it up to the audience? I have more questions here, but if there are questions from the audience, please just raise your hand. Wow, you are gathering questions. So
When do you come to Mexico to render your services?
All right, we'll let you ask the question.
Let's open the market.
So why is Zillow not in Mexico? You asked me earlier today, which is a very fair question. So that means I don't have to answer that one. That would be great. We have our hands full in the U.S. is what I said to the president, and we do. We have so much going on, so many irons in the fire here in the U.S. that we have not expanded internationally yet. Christopher.
So legalizing marijuana, as you say, you can't kill yourself with marijuana, but some of the other drugs you can, and they can be really addictive. So do you worry that you could have more than 80,000 deaths in a country if you made something like that legal, people would try it, get addicted, and we know the consequences?
How many people die eating sugar in excess? Diabetes. How many people die of fat in excess? Obesity. How many people die smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol? I don't think that's the case. The case is that you have to consume with responsibility. Steve Jobs consumed marijuana for 10 years with responsibility, together with LSD. You know which is the largest market segment of consumption here in Seattle, in Washington? Guess who? Microsoft. It's true. I learned it from my friends here. That's the largest customer for marijuana. The people that work for Microsoft. I don't ask the question here.
When did you come out with this public position?
Was
it during your presidency or
I
after?
always hear why I didn't do it when I was president. Like everything in life, everything is processes. There's very few events, maybe only two, that are in a moment. This is being born and dying. The rest is processes. This process of increasing consumption, of increasing criminality because it's a black market, of increasing bad money circulating everywhere, it's a process. When I finished the presidency in Mexico, year 2006, that's the lowest ever crime rate that we had in Mexico in the whole history of Mexico. And that's a fact. It's a hard fact. So at that time, I was not so worried, I was not so attentive that this was becoming a larger and larger and larger program. What caused the problem? The bringing in of force and violence to fight violence. Bringing in the army to the streets of Mexico shaked up the whole deal. This is what Presidente Calderón did. He took a decision just the way President Bush took a decision to go to Iraq. We can go there, finish them in 2 weeks, bring peace in 2 weeks, and build democracy in another 2 weeks. Well, we're waiting for that to happen yet. Same Calderón, he never really evaluated what he was getting into. Imagine these cartels, these organizations with $50 billion US dollars in their hands. They have all kinds of power. So the way to treat it, to me, it should be different. There is a way that it can be done, and that's what is being found with this new trend of legalizing instead of directly confronting and combating. I have a philosophy in life, in the exercise of power. Machiavelli states that you gain respect by imposing power, by being tough. And many governments think like that. When the saint of Loyola teaches that you gain respect by love. You gain respect by convincing people. And with this, I finish. Prohibition, number one in the world, in the origin of the world. Don't eat this apple. Do you hear me, Adam and Eve? Don't eat this apple. And that's the first thing they did, because it was prohibited. So if God would have told them, look, this apple has worms. It's not good for your health. It's going to affect you. I'm sure the behavior would have been different. And that's what I'm suggesting that we should do with drugs. We should tell people this is not good for you, like we do with the cigarette boxes that they show you the cancer in the lungs. And, well, that is not being done with drugs. Because when something is prohibited, you cannot market the disadvantage of that, or you cannot communicate. So, but when drugs become legalized, then you're going to get all the warnings, and you're going to learn all the impact that it has in your health, in your behavior. And we respond positively to that kind of messages.
Are there any world leaders, including either President Bush, with whom you had very good relations, I understand, when you were president, who have are very disappointed in your current public position and have told you as much?
Which is the question? If?
Have you lost any friends over your you clearly gained friends in certain circles.
There is no friends there. They don't exist. The friends and the good people is with citizens. And there, Matt and I, we've been out of the administration now for 7 years, 9 years. We have never had a rejection. We walk out on the streets, no security. If President Clinton was here, you needed 2 rooms. One for the bodyguards and the security, and the other one for the audience. No, we don't. We just go out on the street, we just walk.
But what would President Bush say if he heard you say that America should legalize heroin and cocaine? Would he say?
Well, he can do nothing about it. I think about Obama. And Obama is in a trap. You heard his declarations 2 weeks ago. He said marijuana is less harmful than alcohol. Finally, he said that 2 weeks ago. Because he's in a problem. How can you have at the same time a federal prohibition, criminalization, and punishment for those who use drugs in Washington State, and Washington State says, no, don't worry about them. You here, you can use marijuana. Big conflict, and it has to be solved one way or another. And I'm sure federal government is going to change. Because today, 60% of all Americans are in favor of legalizing at least marijuana. 60%. So government, U.S. government, will have to change because people is demanding that change.
There were a lot of questions. So.
Hello. I'd like to ask you to expand on your comments on NAFTA and in particular with regard to the displacement of agricultural workers after U.S. subsidized products, particularly corn and meat, entered the market.
Well, NAFTA was a big discussion 20 years ago. Big, big discussion. And leaders had to take tough decisions. And in this case, President Salinas in Mexico decided and convinced Congress to go ahead when people and public opinion was in a majority against joining NAFTA. That same situation is today in many countries in Latin America. They do not have yet trade agreements, and the governments have not had the capacity or the leadership to move ahead with trade agreements. So it was not easy at the beginning, but NAFTA proved that it was the right idea, that it built up this situation that we have today, that is the envy of all the rest of countries in Latin America. main argument was agriculture, food, that how Mexico could compete with United States with such a difference in the markets and the size of agriculture in each side. Today, the trade balance on food, agriculture, products is in favor of Mexico. We export more, much more to United States than what we're importing. We import grain, where United States is very competitive, and it's very competitive because it subsidizes the grain producers. So we import grain and we export the whole rest of it. The avocados that Marta has, her own little place there in Michoacan that produces avocados, the strawberries, the lettuces, at the ranch of my family, broccolis, cauliflowers, Brussels sprouts. The largest freezing plant in Mexico is right there at the ranch. 2,000 jobs were created with that in a ranch of 800 acres. So it worked, but now it needs reinventing, needs a little bit more. But the arguments still in Latin America are in the same direction. Trading is a win-win situation. Everybody wins by trading. And that's the power of this nation is exporting, which, by the way, something similar to what you do here, IT, information technologies. India exports 168 billion US dollars worth of IT services to the global US corporations here. So there's always markets for everybody. Trading is a good thing, and it works pretty well.
We have time for one more question.
I want to ask about Mexico. In 2000, you won an election after 70 plus years of one-party rule. That party is now back in power. Do you think they've changed their ways?
First, yes, I was the first Democratic president in Mexico, and I was the first Mexican president taller than U.S. president. That's an accomplishment, ain't it? We had to go back to Abraham Lincoln's time, too. Okay, but yes, I backed up Presidente Peña on this recent election. He's from the PRI. I think, and I'm convinced, that there's a new generation of priistas now, that they learned the lesson and that they changed. At least this new generation, which is 40 or under, in the PRI in Mexico. Number two, after long time, 71 years, I came to the conclusion, why should I be boxed in a political party? Boxed all my life. Why should I be boxed in the small box of religion, thinking? In my case, Catholic. Why should we? We are free and we have choices and we can do it with responsibility. I really believe that the era of ideologies is over in the political spectrum. And those who are the winners, which is Asia, are showing us the way. They are not governments of ideology. In China, you don't have a Maoist or a Trotskyist or whoever else ideology in government. There's one government that is pragmatic, that knows that customers or citizens' desire is for education, for health, for a job, for income, or for happiness at the very end. So government should be very pragmatic today and not ideologically driven. That's my own personal belief. And that's why I backed up Enrique Peña. I had his commitment. It was not free that I joined him and supported him. I had his promise and commitment that he would go through the 3 key reforms for Mexico: the energy reform, the tax reform, and the education reform. And he's done the 3 of them now in 1 year in power. And so I'm happy with the decision I took. And that doesn't mean that he's got me for granted supporting him. I complain about what the hell he had to go to Cuba for, to get that picture with Castro. I mean, what can he get out of Cuba? What he should be is demanding from Cuba a change for freedom and for democracy. And so I also am a critic of some of his actions. But the message here is religions, ideologies in political parties, to me, are not enough, and we should not be boxed there. So what is then what we should do? In the case of political spectrum, let's decide what is best this year with this candidate for my nation, United States. And I don't need to vote Republican because I was born or I was taught in home that I should be a Republican or a Democrat. In the case of religion, this marvelous world of spirituality, these messages of Dalai Lama, these messages of many religions about harmony, about happiness, about humanism, about compassion, about passion for doing things, that's much better than being boxed on a specific religion. My father was an evangelist, my grandfather, an evangelist Protestant. He came from Cincinnati, Ohio, as a migrant down to Mexico back in 1895. And he made his American dream in Mexico as a migrant. When he was dying, this lady, my mother, so Catholic, profound Catholic, every day the rosary, the 50 Ave Marias, and the Mass and everything that she taught us. She was really worried when my father with Alzheimer was about to go. And so she said, I have to baptize him because otherwise he will go to hell. So here she comes, my mother calls the priest, gets the water there and and throws the priest in the bed of in the room of my grandfather to baptize him. And immediately my grandfather said, get this guy out of here. I don't want him here. Because he was wearing his black suit. And so there he's thrown out, no baptism. So my mother, she couldn't accept that. So she said, I'm going to try again. Because she had only 3-4 days remaining. And so she comes with an idea, and she said, okay, he calls the priest again, and she dressed him up like a charro with a big hat on it. His charro dress, and maybe instead of holy water, he had tequila here. And so he goes in, he baptizes my grandfather, and finally my mother, she was happy like nobody could have been. In the family, we question whether my grandfather is in Catholic heaven or is in Protestant heaven. Did you read about this guy that was buried on his motorcycle, on his Honda, no, his Harley Davidson? Because he said he wanted to get to heaven on his Harley Davidson. So they put him underground on his Harley Davidson. I'm going to do that with my horse. I'm going to go to heaven on my horse. Gracias.
We covered a lot of ground, a lot of heavy topics around religion and philosophy and crime and immigration and also a lot of interesting lighthearted topics. There was one last question that came in. We'll end with a softball. Favorite Mexican vacation destination that we should know about?
No doubt. San Cristobal, please remember.
San Cristobal.
Where Vicente Fox is the first presidential library ever in Mexico. look for the place on the web page, centrofox.org/mx. And you'll find happiness there. You will find the best mole you ever tasted, the best enchiladas, and the best tequila. And you're all welcome to come, really, and I mean it. You have our webpage or our email is foxma, Foxma 42, @gmail.com. Here with us is Mrs. Blackberry, right here. Martha Blackberry. She has, look at, show the Blackberry, Martha, please. I'm jealous of that Blackberry. 24 hours a day, she's with a Blackberry. And better than Domino's Pizza, she will answer in 3 seconds at any time of the day. So please send us your mail to Mrs. Blackberry.
Thank you, President Fox and Marta. Thank you very much.